Hey guys, it's Dani. Today we're gonna talk about recently repotted orchids. We all do repottings, and I personally have filmed quite a lot of them, and then I usually do updates after a few months or a year on the orchid. But what happens right after the repotting, a few weeks after? What should we really expect? What are the results of my repottings? Are the orchids really responding well to my techniques and all of that? So today we're going to take a look at the recently repotted orchids in the past few months, and even on the ones that I repotted last week, because there are things to talk about, and hopefully this will be interesting or educational and we can actually draw some conclusions based on my experience. So with that said, let's start with a cattleya. Alrighty then, so this is the Pothos Inara Burana Beauty. This is the orchid we worked with in my how to remove sphagnum moss from orchid roots repotting video. So today it is the 12th of June and this video was uploaded on the 13th of May. And PS, for those of you who suggested that I date my videos, there's really no need to. YouTube dates them for you. You cannot cheat the date that YouTube posts there. And if you're on mobile, it appears in the description. If you are on your computer, it appears right below the actual video. So I published this on the 13th of May. I might have filmed it on the 12th of May. So we are doing an update 1 month later. Now, if you remember, I told you in that video that it is worth it to actually try and remove the sphagnum moss as gentle as possible from roots, especially from cattleya roots. In that video, I used tweezers and I told you that I really don't suspect the orchid will lose any roots because I really didn't damage them. And PS, I'll link you the video down below. So let's take a look at her today. Let's take a look at the root system. As you can see, it looks in very good shape. Roots have started to grow, they're growing down in the medium. There are new roots coming from these new growths right here. And overall, the root system looks very, very good 1 month later. I can also tell you it doesn't smell bad, so I really don't believe any roots died. And as we know, cattleya roots can be quite finicky, quite sensitive. So even a repotting from sphagnum moss, which if you remember was pretty compacted, if you take your time, if you don't hurry, if you do a good job, you can actually save the root system of your orchid, even if it is a cattleya orchid. And at least in my opinion, sphagnum moss is actually pretty easy to remove. Even if it is compacted, even if the orchid is root bound, it is laborious, yes, but it's not as damaging as bark would be. So this orchid told us that what we thought and what we did was correct and was indeed in the benefit of the orchid. I don't suspect we're gonna have too much of a setback. But that's not the only thing this orchid taught us. Because it's coming from a very high moisture medium, the root system is adapted to high moisture as well. Semi-hydroponics can be both ventilated and very, very high moisture, if we keep it that way. One thing that I like to do is try to make this acclimation period as easy as possible for orchids. If they're coming from sphagnum moss, I will make sure that the medium stays rather wet than dry. And even if this pot was watered 2 or 3 days ago, I am going to water it again today, even though I still have moisture inside, simply because this orchid is coming from a very, very high moisture environment. And you can see it on these pseudobulbs. This orchid naturally has ridges, but if you look on these pseudobulbs, you can see there is a little bit of shriveling, of dehydration. It is not excessive, but it is enough to tell me that indeed this orchid needs a little bit more moisture. But because I really don't want the new roots to be super adapted to very high moisture, I want them to be adapted to a little bit more of a dry situation, or in between, slightly drier. I am not going to keep this orchid constantly moist. You can see the top is already dry. That's okay. I want the new roots to be more adapted to drought because that's how my environment is. So I'm trying to maintain things slightly more moist than I would, but not incredibly moist, because I don't want this orchid to produce, again, roots specialized to high moisture. I'm just easing this orchid into my environment. So I'm going to water this orchid right now. I do think this is a success, and the 20 minutes or half an hour that I spent picking all of the bits and pieces of sphagnum moss, I believe are totally worth it. Just look at that root system. It's like nothing ever happened. It looks impeccable. If I wouldn't have paid attention to how I removed the moss, maybe the outcome would not have been this right now. Alrighty, next up, surprise, surprise, the Dendrobiums we worked with last week. So as you can see, I published this video on the 5th of June. Today it is the 12th of June. So let's make an update today because stuff have happened. So first of all, the leaves didn't really make it as much as I tried to save them. But this one, which actually we didn't work on, but we featured because I did it off camera, it does have the leaves still. So it would appear that the leaves were indeed very affected by the bacterial infection. That's okay. They're not going to help us out too much, but the canes do have quite a lot of stored nutrients. So if I remember correctly, in that video, I said something of the sorts. These ones might actually produce new growth now, but the one in the back, no, he's just maturing this growth. This is the one that I didn't show you. And let's see if I was right. This is the Verano green star. Well, there are no roots just yet, but what do we have right there? Yes, that is a new growth just started. Mind you, it's only been 7 days since I unpacked this orchid and put her in semi-hydroponics. We do have a few stumpy little roots. They keep the canes hydrated still, but they're not a proper root system. However, though, the new growth will create a new root system. And on this side, I think I do see this little node here swelling up. We might have a new growth very, very soon from this one as well. How about the other Dendrobium? This is the Kultana Fancy. Well, this one is even better. We have a new growth swelling here, and look at that, a new growth on the cane in the back as well. Or actually, no, it's coming from the same cane. So from the newest cane, you can see we have two little new growths, little stumpy root right there, but that's okay. This is the Dendrobium that we actually worked with. Remember, we cut the cane here. As you can see, I don't think the infection spread downwards. I think we are good with this one. But there we go, we have brand new growth. Now with this one that I did off camera, I think I told you in that video that I don't expect new growth as soon as the other two, because this one is still working on maturing the newest cane. And that's what it is doing right now. I do not see any new growth, but I am suspecting new root production very soon, since this is actually a new cane. And what do we have here? We have a new root tip starting. So with this orchid, we cannot talk about new growth, but new roots definitely, because this is a new cane. Now let's do an exercise of imagination. Let's imagine that at the time when I repotted them, I would have used a booster, such as kelp, maybe Super Thrive, maybe I prepared something myself, such as willow water, maybe I fertilized the heck out of them. And 1 week later we have this result, and I would make this update and I would tell you, use this substance because it is the holy grail, it is the miracle we've all been waiting for in the orchid hobby. Well, that video would have been viral and it would have been based on a lie. Good thing I didn't do that, right? Well, I'm not the type. What happened with these orchids? Why did they start to grow so fast? Simple. Timing. Sometimes we don't really want to accept the most simple explanation with things simply because it is simple, and orchids are not simple. It is actually as simple as it gets right here. It is the right time. These orchids are in the growing season. The canes were completely mature. The bottom was preparing the nodes, and even though if you look back on that video I didn't have any swelling, just because the canes were mature, I predicted that new growth should start really soon. I did not expect it to grow this fast, but hey, there we go, perfect timing. But that is just experience and timing, nothing else, no miracle substance. And you can see that with this one, which is not mature just yet, it doesn't happen because it's not the perfect timing yet. We do, however, have new roots. So with repotting, indeed, if you do a repotting at the correct time when new growth should start, you can theoretically see new growth on an orchid even if it is rootless, even if it is stressed, even if it's coming from a 1 month transport, right away, a few days after, a week after. It's not always going to happen, but if you catch the orchid at the right time, exactly when it's supposed to grow new growth, there you have it, without any magical substances. So that can happen as well, but it's not that often, sadly. Speaking about the right time, what is this right time that I'm referring to? Well, it depends on the orchid, really. So first of all, sympodial orchids, meaning those that create pseudobulbs and new growths or fans, pretty much those that have a rhizome, can be repotted best when they start to produce new roots or when they grow a new growth. And soon the new roots will emerge, depending on the growth pattern. And this is quite logical. Why? With new growth, new roots will be formed. Therefore, they will grow and adapt to the medium you are going to use with them. Also, if you're dealing with a rootless orchid or an orchid which will lose its roots when you repot, that can happen, there will be new roots ready to start absorbing water. Therefore, dehydration will be at a minimum. And if dehydration is at a minimum, it means the orchid will not be set back, it will not stale. Pretty much the shock of transplanting will be minimal. So with all of these orchids which have a rhizome, they don't have a central axis necessarily from which everything grows, it is actually advisable to repot when the orchid is just starting to produce new roots. Of course, you can bend this rule, and it is advisable that you do if you have a major problem with the medium, if you cannot wait anymore, if you have pests, if the medium is just so acidic and so broken down that even if the orchid will try to produce new roots, they will just die, and whatever old roots which are still viable will die within a few days if we don't do anything. So that's an extreme case, of course. That's something I always do if I have issues with the medium. I always repot no matter the time. But if the medium is clean, if it is just for maintenance purposes, you can actually wait a little bit longer for the orchid to produce new growth and new roots, just so the transition is easier. And P.S. this has been the Encyclia Serena O'Neill, which I didn't actually film the repot, but I filmed the unboxing. Remember when I made you pick the orchids that I'm gonna buy? So I published this on the 4th of May, again about a month later, and you can see my Serena O'Neill, even with the flower spike, still is doing really great. We have new roots, there is no dehydration, and the new growth looks very good, simply because good timing. There's no magic to it really. And this good timing can depend on the orchid. Even if the orchid is in bloom, it doesn't matter, it can still be the good time. But also we should couple this good timing with a gentle repotting, as gentle as we can. Even if we're dealing with organic medium, we still need to take care of the older roots. The less we damage them, the more chances they have to be viable, to live after the repotting, and to continue to hydrate the orchid. In my book, more is more when it comes to roots, and I always try my best to save as many good roots as possible. Now, in the same order with the Encyclia Serena O'Neill, if you check the video below with the unboxing, I got an Arantis grandiflora. Now, this is not a sympodial orchid. It is a monopodial, meaning it has a central axis, and its new growth is not a new shoot. This is actually a keiki. We can detach it and grow it as a single plant. In the case of sympodials, we cannot really detach individual pseudobulbs and have them grow at normal speed. No, we will have a setback. Even though we can actually propagate orchids like that, they will not have a full recovery and act like nothing ever happened. That's pretty much the difference with monopodials and sympodials at a glance, in this aspect at least. There are many differences. So anyway, I repotted this orchid as well, but being that it is a monopodial, when is the right time for this orchid? Well, we need to think about its pattern of growth. Is it an orchid that receives a dormancy, that loses its leaves? No. And yes, monopodial orchids can be deciduous as well. There are some Phalaenopsis species which are. So this one has continuous growth. This, however, doesn't really mean that all year round it is a good time to repot. No. The growing season or vegetative season for this orchid is the warmer months, when new roots are more likely to be produced because of the warm temperatures, because of the stronger light and longer day length. So with these orchids, even if they're not sympodial, even if they don't have specific growth patterns, it is better to repot them when they're more active in the warmer months. Usually in springtime it is perfect because it's not excessively warm, but if you control the temperature in your growing space, you can obviously repot them in summer as well. And this one was repotted somewhere after the 4th of May, so let's say a month ago. And even though with this one I don't really have many visible roots, you can see inside I hope you can see at least, I do have new roots. That's a new root tip sprouting right there. We have another root tip developing right there. So with these orchids, even if the roots are a little bit brown, it can actually be staining. And if I remember correctly, I did a good job in removing all of the dead roots on this orchid. It doesn't smell when I water it, so I do suspect that I have quite good roots inside this medium. I don't want to bother it too much, but yeah. Oh, there we go. We have another root just hugging the leca right there. That's cute. So even with monopodials, if you do a gentle repot, as gentle as you can, even with bark, you can actually have the orchid grow just like that. With all of these orchids, I didn't use anything else than what I always use, meaning leca, hydrogen peroxide, which disinfects the roots and kills off snails, but it doesn't really do anything other than that. It doesn't feed the orchid in any way. I haven't even fertilized these orchids just yet. I will start to because it's been a month. They do have beautiful roots starting to grow. They do have new growth, so I can now put them on a regular schedule since I do fertilize pretty lightly at every watering. And there we have it. So if you will, semi-hydroponics for me in this environment is somewhere in between sphagnum moss and bark, but I do have to adapt just a little bit, just for a few months after I repot orchids until they get established, and that usually pays off. I am more attentive to when they dry out, but that doesn't last long, and in a few months, depending on the orchid, maybe even sooner, I put them on a normal schedule together with my other orchids. And that's the whole trick. Somebody once asked me, well, the books say something, but you seem to get away with other things. I don't really get away with them. I work a little bit with them. I try to assess the situation. And yes, with the new orchids that need more time to adapt or acclimate, I do work with them. I do hassle a little bit more, but it's not a whole lot. And in the end, I believe it pays off. All that picking the moss pays off, even with cattleyas. And that's the whole trick, you guys. And I hope this was useful, seeing orchids that were repotted just a few weeks ago. This is how they evolve, and from now on, I do hope I will give you updates on blooms. Who knows? Fingers crossed. So alrighty guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you found it interesting. And you know the drill. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, talks of the sorts, and updates. And if you want to be notified by YouTube whenever I upload a video, just turn on all notification for my channel, and hopefully YouTube will notify you. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!